You cross the border expecting familiar comfort food, but something's wrong. Empty parking lots for Lease signs, and the chains you once loved now feel like ghost towns. Canadian tourists have voted with their wallets, and major U.S. restaurant chains are closing locations faster than ever before. McDonald's crisis. You'd think the Golden Arches would be untouchable. After all, McDonald's practically invented modern fast food and spread American dining culture worldwide. But for Canadian travelers, those familiar yellow signs now represent something else entirely. Disappointment served with a side of regret. The collapse is measurable and swift. Canadian spending at U.S. McDonald's locations plummeted 29% in the past 12 months alone. That's not a minor dip during economic uncertainty. That's a mass exodus from what was once considered a reliable road trip staple. What's driving Canadians away? The answer lies in a tale of two McDonald's. Walk into a Canadian location and you'll find digital kiosks, cleaner dining areas, and ingredients that actually taste fresh. Cross the border into the U.S., and you're stepping back in time. Broken ice cream machines, dim lighting, and fries that taste like they've been sitting under heat lamps for hours. Social media amplified the contrast. A Toronto family's TikTok comparing their home McDonald's experience to a Detroit location went viral, racking up over 400,000 views. The American meal looked like a sad imitation of the Canadian version. Smaller portions, cheaper packaging, and burgers that barely resembled the menu photos. The impact is hitting border communities hard. 3 McDonald's locations in Bellingham, Washington, closed permanently in early 2025. Franchise owners in Plattsburgh, New York report Canadian customer visits down 60% compared to 2 years ago. When the world's most recognizable restaurant brand starts losing its grip, you know something fundamental has shifted. While McDonald's struggles with basics like cleanliness and consistency, another iconic chain is facing an even more dramatic collapse that's left investors scrambling and employees jobless. Red Lobster bankruptcy. Red Lobster's dramatic collapse tells the story of a brand that ignored warning signs until it was too late. In March 2025, the seafood chain filed for bankruptcy protection, announcing the closure of nearly 100 locations across the United States. But Canadian diners saw this coming years before Wall Street caught on. The numbers reveal a stunning abandonment. A decade ago, 30% of Canadian road trippers included Red Lobster stops during their U.S. travels. By 2024, that figure had crashed to just 8%. Long before financial analysts were sounding alarms, Canadian tourists were already voting with their feet and wallets. What killed the magic? Those famous warm, buttery biscuits started arriving cold. The lobster that built the brand's reputation became rubbery and overpriced. Dining rooms that once felt cozy now looked tired, with worn carpets and flickering fluorescent lights that made even fresh seafood look unappetizing. Meanwhile, Canada's own seafood scene was evolving rapidly. From Halifax's innovative lobster roll shops to Vancouver's sustainable oyster bars, Canadian diners discovered what fresh, ethically sourced seafood actually tastes like. Red Lobster's industrialized approach suddenly felt outdated and artificial by comparison. A particularly telling moment came when a Montreal food blogger documented her family's disappointing Red Lobster experience in Rochester, New York. The post, titled $47 for Frozen Disappointment, was shared over 15,000 times across Canadian travel groups. Comments flooded in with similar stories of overpriced mediocrity. But seafood wasn't the only cuisine Canadians are rejecting. Even America's steakhouse empire, built on promises of premium cuts and Australian charm, is watching Canadian customers disappear just as dramatically. Outback Steakhouse decline. Outback Steakhouse once felt like an adventure for Canadian travelers. The Australian theme, blooming onions, and promise of hearty steaks made it a novelty worth seeking out during U.S. road trips. But novelty only carries a brand so far, and for Outback, that distance has run out. Tourism surveys from 2024 revealed a crushing 31% drop in planned Canadian visits to Outback locations. What was once considered a must-try experience has become something Canadians actively avoid. The Australian charm that once felt authentic now seems forced and outdated. The food quality tells the real story. Steaks arrive overcooked or underseasoned, despite premium pricing that often exceeds $40 per entree. Sides taste like they emerged from a freezer bag rather than a kitchen. The famous blooming onion, once Instagram-worthy, now feels like an oil-soaked gimmick that leaves you questioning your choices. Canadian diners have found better alternatives at home. Farm-to-table steakhouses in cities like Calgary and Toronto are serving locally sourced, grass-fed beef with creative seasonal sides for similar prices. The contrast is stark when you've experienced a perfectly grilled Alberta beef tenderloin and then encounter Outback's industrial approach to steak preparation. The tipping point came when a Calgary couple's TikTok went viral, featuring their $38 Outback steak that looked like it had lost a fight with a microwave. The video racked up over 200,000 views, with comments calling it highway robbery and an insult to beef. Social media amplified what many Canadian diners were already thinking. Outback had lost its way. While Outback loses ground to superior alternatives, one childhood favorite is breaking hearts across generations as nostalgia collides with disappointing reality. Dairy Queen disappointment. Nothing hurts quite like watching a childhood favorite fall apart before your eyes. Dairy Queen once represented pure joy for Canadian families crossing the border, soft-serve cones, blizzards mixed to perfection, and that distinctive red and white branding that promised sweet memories. Now those same families are walking away disappointed and vowing never to return. The financial impact is undeniable. Canadian spending at U.S. Dairy Queen locations plummeted 35% over the past 12 months. But behind those numbers lies a tale of systematic neglect that's destroying decades of brand loyalty built on simple pleasures done right. The quality gap between Canadian and American Dairy Queen operations has become impossible to ignore. While Canadian locations maintain strict standards for equipment maintenance and food handling, their U.S. counterparts are cutting corners. Ice cream arrives half-melted from malfunctioning machines. Birthday cakes show clear signs of freezer burn. Burgers taste like they've been reheated in microwaves rather than grilled fresh. A Quebec family's experience perfectly captured this decline. Their TikTok video from a Vermont Dairy Queen showed melted ice cream dripping through a broken cone, sticky tables that hadn't been cleaned, and a manager who simply shrugged when they complained about the poor service. The video sparked thousands of comments from Canadians sharing similar disappointing experiences. The contrast is striking when you consider that Canadian Dairy Queen locations continue to thrive by maintaining the quality standards that built the brand's reputation. American franchisees, meanwhile, seem content to coast on nostalgia while delivering substandard experiences that betray customer trust. Ice cream isn't the only sweet memory turning sour for Canadian visitors. Even mall food courts, once reliable fallbacks for quick meals during shopping trips, are losing their appeal as quality standards continue to slip. Panda Express flavor fatigue. Panda Express epitomizes everything wrong with modern mall food culture. What once passed for convenient Chinese-American cuisine now feels like a sugar-coated insult to anyone who's experienced authentic Asian flavors. Canadian shoppers, increasingly sophisticated in their food choices, are rejecting Panda Express in record numbers. The abandonment is measurable and swift. Canadian spending at Panda Express locations in border malls dropped 41% over the past year. Those steam trays that once drew curious crowds now sit longer, food congealing under heat lamps while customers walk past without a second glance. The problems start with the food itself. Orange chicken arrives as sticky sweet candy masquerading as dinner. Lo mein noodles clump together from sitting too long in warming trays. Vegetables drown in syrupy sauces that taste more like dessert than stir-fry. It's fast food pretending to be ethnic cuisine, and Canadian diners aren't buying the charade anymore. A Vancouver couple's shopping trip to Bellingham perfectly captured this sentiment. Their TikTok video titled, "Canada Deserves Better Stir-Fry," showed them comparing a $22 Panda Express meal to fresh noodles from their local Asian fusion spot back home. The contrast was embarrassing. The video went viral overnight, generating hundreds of comments from Canadians sharing their own Panda Express regrets. Meanwhile, Canada's Asian food scene is exploding with authentic flavors, fresh ingredients, and bold spices that make Panda Express taste like a pale imitation. Food trucks serving real Vietnamese pho and Korean bulgogi are thriving while mall Chinese food sits ignored. But mall food wasn't the only casualty of changing Canadian tastes. Even established sit-down restaurants with decades of history and loyal followings are watching their Canadian customer base vanish. TGI Fridays, stagnation. TGI Fridays feels like stepping into a time capsule that nobody asked to preserve. The red-striped awnings and brass fixtures that once screamed fun now whisper dated desperation. For Canadian diners who've embraced fresh, locally sourced cuisine and innovative flavors, walking into a Fridays feels like traveling backward through culinary history. The menu tells the story of a brand that stopped trying: loaded potato skins drowning in processed cheese, buffalo wings swimming in artificial sauce, burgers stacked with bacon, onion rings, and enough grease to lubricate a small engine. These offerings haven't changed meaningfully in over a decade, while Canadian dining preferences have evolved dramatically toward healthier, more thoughtful options. The atmosphere compounds the problem. Faded memorabilia clutters walls like a garage sale nobody wants to attend. Booth cushions show years of wear. The lighting feels harsh and unflattering, making even fresh food look unappetizing. It's the aesthetic equivalent of a hangover from the 1990s party scene. Canadian travelers increasingly seek restaurants that reflect their values: sustainability, local sourcing, and creative presentation. TGI Fridays offers none of these. Instead, it doubles down on portion sizes and processed ingredients that feel excessive rather than indulgent. The empty booths speak louder than any survey data. During peak dinner hours on weekends, locations in Rochester and Syracuse that once bustled with Canadian visitors now serve scattered tables of disappointed diners. The festive atmosphere that built the brand has been replaced by an awkward silence that no amount of memorabilia can fill. While some chains refuse to evolve beyond their glory days, others are collapsing under the weight of their own excess, creating chaos that drives even loyal customers away. Buffalo Wild Wings chaos. Buffalo Wild Wings' assault on the senses begins the moment you walk through the door. Television screens blare from every angle, fans scream over basketball games, and servers shout to be heard above the manufactured chaos. For Canadian diners accustomed to civilized sports pubs with reasonable volume levels, Buffalo Wild Wings feels like being trapped inside a pinball machine. The exodus is documented and dramatic. Canadian visits to Buffalo Wild Wings locations across northern U.S. states declined 29% in the past year. What was once considered a fun, rowdy escape has devolved into expensive sensory torture that leaves customers exhausted rather than entertained. The pricing adds insult to injury. A typical order for 2 people, wings, fries, and a couple of beers, easily exceeds $72 before tips. That's steakhouse money for bar food that arrives lukewarm and under-seasoned. A Winnipeg couple documented their shock when their simple wing dinner cost more than a full restaurant meal back home. Service quality has plummeted alongside the experience. Orders arrive cold after lengthy waits. Servers, overwhelmed by noise and understaffing, struggle to provide basic attention. The famous sauce selection, once Buffalo Wild Wings' main attraction, now feels like window dressing on dried-out chicken that lacks the bold flavors promised on the menu. Meanwhile, Canadian microbreweries and wing joints are thriving by offering what Buffalo Wild Wings forgot: quality food, reasonable prices, and atmospheres where you can actually hold conversations. These local spots serve fresh wings with creative flavors in environments that enhance, rather than assault, the dining experience. Loud sports bars aren't the only places Canadians are avoiding during their U.S. travels. Even traditionally quiet diners that once promised comfort and familiarity are losing their charm as standards slip. Denny's decline. Denny's used to be the reliable comfort of late-night road trips and early morning drives. That glowing yellow sign off the highway promised warmth, coffee, and hearty breakfasts any time of day. For Canadian travelers, it was part of the American experience, a 24-hour diner culture that felt authentically different from home. Now it feels like a sad parody of what diners used to represent. The abandonment is swift and measurable. Early 2025 surveys showed a devastating 41% drop in planned Canadian visits to Denny's during U.S. trips. The numbers reflect a broader disillusionment with a brand that's forgotten what made it special in the first place. The food quality has collapsed alongside the atmosphere. Grand Slam breakfasts arrive cold despite $39 price tags that would buy premium brunch in most Canadian cities. Hash browns taste like cardboard. Pancakes come out flat and flavorless. Even the coffee, once a diner staple, tastes burnt and bitter from machines that clearly need maintenance. The physical spaces tell their own story of decline. Gone is the cozy diner charm of red vinyl booths and warm lighting. Instead, you're greeted by beige plastic furniture, chipped syrup containers, and fluorescent lighting that makes everything look institutional rather than inviting. It's the aesthetic of giving up. Meanwhile, Canada's diner scene is experiencing a renaissance. From Montreal's artisanal brunch spots to Toronto's modern comfort food cafes, Canadian establishments are proving that diner culture can evolve without losing its soul. They offer fresh ingredients, creative presentations, and atmospheres that actually feel welcoming. But breakfast wasn't the only meal disappointing Canadian travelers during their US visits. Lunch chains that once represented quick, reliable options are struggling just as badly to maintain basic standards. Subway's fresh problem? Subway's "Eat Fresh" slogan has become the most ironic promise in fast food. Walk into a US location expecting a quick, healthy sandwich, and you'll encounter bread with the texture of rubber, vegetables that look like they've been sitting in water for days, and meat that doesn't resemble anything found in nature. For Canadian travelers who know what fresh actually tastes like, Subway has become a cautionary tale of false advertising. The financial impact tells the story clearly. Cross-border Canadian sales at US Subway franchises plummeted 42% over the past year. That's not a minor dip during economic uncertainty. That's a mass rejection of a brand that's lost all credibility with quality-conscious consumers. The problems go deeper than just taste. Health inspection failures plagued multiple US Subway locations throughout 2024, with violations ranging from improper food storage to unsanitary preparation areas. Meanwhile, questionable meat sourcing practices and sky-high sodium levels in processed ingredients have left many customers wondering what exactly they're eating. A Calgary student perfectly captured the contrast in a viral social media post. Her side-by-side photo comparison showed a fresh, well-assembled sandwich from a Canadian Subway next to a sad, wilted creation from a Detroit location. The difference was striking enough to generate over 200,000 likes and thousands of comments from Canadians sharing similar disappointing experiences. The irony is painful. Canadian Subway locations quietly improved their ingredients and presentation, while their US counterparts cut corners and ignored basic quality standards. The same brand, two completely different experiences separated only by an invisible border. Even as individual chains crumble under the weight of their own declining standards, the broader trend reveals something more disturbing about American dining culture that goes far beyond any single restaurant's failures. The bigger picture, the collapse of individual restaurant chains, reveals a systemic crisis that goes far beyond cold fries and poor service. What we're witnessing is the breakdown of an entire approach to food that prioritized profits over quality, convenience over care, and scale over substance. Canadian diners have simply moved on to something better, leaving American chains scrambling to understand what went wrong. The financial impact is staggering. Over $150 million in Canadian tourism spending vanished from major US food chains in just 12 months. That's not market fluctuation. That's a complete loss of confidence in brands that once seemed untouchable. The most revealing aspect is how the same corporate brands deliver vastly different experiences across borders. McDonald's Canada invests in digital innovation and fresh ingredients, while US locations struggle with broken equipment and stale food. Subway Canada quietly upgraded their sourcing, while American franchises cut corners on basic quality standards. This divergence reflects deeper cultural shifts. Canadian dining has evolved toward health consciousness, sustainability, and authenticity. Local sourcing matters. Clean ingredients are expected, not premium upgrades. Restaurants that fail to adapt simply don't survive in a market where consumers have choices and standards. Border state economies are feeling the economic reality of empty restaurant parking lots. Tourism-dependent communities that counted on Canadian shoppers for 30% of their restaurant revenue now watch establishments close permanently. The ripple effects extend beyond individual chains to entire commercial districts built around cross-border traffic. This isn't just about bad meals or disappointing service. It's about an entire industry that stopped caring about quality while their northern neighbors moved on to something fundamentally better.